That one looked like a cross-cut saw blade, and up and down and up and down. Okay, going on to item 6, reports. Report on the December 2023 Operations Department. Hello, Damon.
Good afternoon, directors. Hey, so even though the holidays were upon us in December, that doesn't mean we are not out there in the field doing safe, efficient, and effective work. So just going to give you I'll give you a visual rundown of some of the work that we
With a
did last
camera
month.
too.
What's that?
With a camera on top of it.
Yes, exactly right. So, we don't often highlight the elimination of infrastructure, or the abandonment of infrastructure. This is the case down in Rancho Calaveras on McAtee. A valve that's no longer necessary. It was actually leaking at the water main. So you can see there's quite a bit of deflection there also on the T coming off at that blue repair, or that blue coupler. You can see it's leaking actually at the valve itself. And there is the tap saddle with the valve on it. So the picture in the image on the left, you can see the water leaking. The pickup tube for the Vactor truck, image on the right, is the top of the tap saddle, and that's quite a bit of corrosion. And the brass on the valve, you can see it's quite old. It's been in there for a while. So it's always great to be able to eliminate aged and obsolete infrastructure, get it out of there, and save water. So that's what the guys did. Do a great job. You can see a little bit of the tuberculation inside the valve in the image on the left, and then the after in the image on the right. And these coupling connectors have just, they're space age nowadays. So a lot of that's like 2-bolt coupling on the water main, and they're called Hymax couplings, and they're just super effective, and they're really easy to install. So not only are we improving our efforts constantly, but sometimes the tools that we have are also improving. So just an interesting, you can see there's another line in there. I'm not sure, I didn't get feedback from the field guys on what that other line is in this image on the left, but you can see a repair on Wong Court, some of that infamous bluebell that we have out in the system. You look at it and it breaks. You smack it and it spirals, and you got to pull out 20 feet of it. So it's very delicate stuff. Moving on so over time, one of the objectives that we have out in the field currently is to really reestablish some of the information and the understanding of our infrastructure that we might have lost over the years. So over time, you can lose, location of valves or how the system is functioning accurately. And so here's a case of that. So we're exposing some valves that address our B zone at our A tank in Rancho Calaveras. And you can see, staff in the image on the left, they're scraping the top, they're using a metal detector, and then they're finding, of the top of a valve, what we call a G5, so that it's basically a 6-inch section of pipe with a metal lid on top. So that's what they found there on the left, and the image on the right, hiding underneath the question mark are the valve, the tops of the valves there. Yeah. And then
being that these valves can be covered up, they haven't been exercised in one, right?
Correct. Yeah.
They IBM valves.
I would guess that they're resiliency, and I would guess, I would say that once we find them, then we're going to add them to the regimen. Valve exercising, Ralph, is always one of those challenges that our distribution crews really kind of, work to comply with the requirement throughout the season. Generally, it happens when we're doing a repair or a shutdown or isolating parts of the system. We're going to exercise a bunch of valves at that point in time. In this case, you can see that we poured some concrete around those to make sure that they don't disappear again in the future. And then kind of anecdotally to your question about valves and effective operation and valve seating, we were talking about the seat of a fire hydrant earlier in the week out in the field in Rancho. I want to say that was on the end of Cassidy. That the seat of that fire hydrant at install, we're thinking, or due to Some flushing of the system in the past had all these small pebbles, all these small rocks that were just shoved into the resilient seat of that fire hydrant. And so as you shut that thing down, if you have a little water creeping by, you're gonna shut it down even more. Yeah. So to your point, valve operation is a critical component of distribution system operation, and our guys do it. We actually noted in the ops report. You can see that under the distribution crews, valves exercise, and they'll note that in there. Ebbets Pass water system service line repair. You can see it's kind of out in the forest a little bit in between homes. We've got a meter set out there, and the guys are exposing there with the Vector truck. And here we are at the meter box, and then the T in the image on the right, you can see that service line is just plumb snapped off that T. So it's just not even connected. And so, day-to-day work efforts for the field crews, you can see the meter box in the image here on the left. We're going to tee off to another meter box. And the image on the right's really telling. So, hygienic, safe operations of the distribution system. So as the guys complete the repair, they make sure that water meter is not reset, and they're going to go ahead and flush that. And you can see operating that curb stop and flushing the water out of the system before you put the meter back.
Hi, Damon.
Hi.
So on these repairs, are they like emergency repairs where a customer called and said, oh, I've got a water leak, or are they just things that have to be done? Just, I'm looking like in your written report too, and I show like 14 service line repairs. So are those, like I said, it's a customer calling, or we just know they're there, or how does that?
It can be all of the above. So it can, if it's going to directly negatively impact a customer or potentially damage property, it's an emergency. Or if they're out of water, or if it's going to reduce pressure throughout the distribution system to the point of it being unsafe, it's an emergency. If it's leaking slowly, it's out on a cross-country line, and we have 10 leaks ahead of it, it's going to get put on what we call the board, and we're going to get to it when we can get to it. So we have a little bit of all of the above happening.
So pretty much either a customer will call in and say they notice a puddle, or staff out in the field sees it. You do a quick little investigation and decide emergency or not, kind of a thing.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so call kind of just a scenario. Customer notices a leak or has an issue at their home. They call customer service. Customer service will issue what's called a service request to whatever field crew that is. Let's go investigate this. The field crew will complete and close that. Customer service will get an email back, essentially a notice back that says the work has been done. And then contained within that work order or service request report is a synopsis of what happened. Now, go ahead. You're going to say.
I was gonna say, when you do your scheduling of work for the week, or how often do you do it? How many of these do you anticipate? Like, do you have like an emergency, like, our average is 5 a week or whatever that, do you have anything like that? Is there? an average?
I could say, well, just kind of thinking about the operations report, I think we generally average around 25 to 35 in Rancho Calaveras
A day
and-
or a month?
a month.
Okay.
And so then in Ebbets Pass, you're at about 10 to 15 a month, and in Copper, about the same. So you're about 3 a day,
And
right around
these
there
are-
on a
These are
bad month.
service lines, which is the lateral to the customer's house, right?
To their meter set, right, to their meter box, right.
Okay. And then the
correct.
main line work that I see, we only had 2 issues. Those were just scheduled, or were those emergencies?
Generally, a main is going to be an emergency. So, I mean, there are times where you have a water main where you understand you might have a slight leak,
Mhm.
and you know about it, but you're trying to get a crew together to go ahead and get it
Gotcha.
fixed and schedule it.
And-
And, we might have to do a nighttime shutdown. We might have to take customers out of water. So we're going to try to schedule all that. But generally, and knock on wood, but if we have a water main break, it's a direct emergency. And so we're going to
What's
potentially.
our
maybe-
average of those? Any idea?
water
monthly?
main breaks. So thanks to the engineering department of folks like Charles, their frequency is reducing. So
Nice.
I think when Kelly was on the pass with Reach 3A, Reach 1 and Techite, they were every other month, a significant water main break. Nowadays, we're looking at, I would say, 1 a quarter. That's going to actually, make it to the news,
So that's
so to
been
speak.
good progress.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's definite progress. Definite progress. Yeah, it has been a very dramatic improvement.
The photo on the left has me puzzled. That's obviously coming out of the valve box. but the line splits at that brass T. Is that's that's going to the customer's home, isn't it?
So I should have oriented this perhaps a little bit differently. So if you can imagine another meter box on the other side where the other picture would be, where you can see somebody's hands purging water, imagine there being a meter box there. So from the top of your screen down is the service line coming from the water main,
Yeah.
and it's going to serve 2 meter boxes, and you're just looking at one.
Which are usually side by side.
Right, that's right. They're usually right next to each other, and so you're gonna have that T really close to both of those meter boxes. And in this image, it's kind of set off and away a little bit.
The photographer just wasn't tall enough.
Yeah, that's right.
So the lines coming into that T are incoming water from the main.
Correct. And if you look in the image on the right at the kind of above the word Apache, you can see that T
Yeah.
going to the meter box, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So you basically have 2 of those meter sets right there.
Well, it looks like to me that your the gradual growth of these thousands of roots in the ground is your worst enemy, isn't it?
Roots are a continual problem, not only on the water side, but also on the wastewater side. Yep, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yep. So moving on to hydrant replacement, Tree Lane and West Point, you can just hats off to the fabulous work our construction crew and distribution crew guys do. I mean, that's really clean work. You know,
It is pretty.
yeah,
Good.
pretty sanitary pad for that hydrant. Looks really good. And you guys know a garbage bag on a hydrant, fire hydrant is not a good thing, you know. That means do not use, you know, we don't like those, so we want to get rid of those.
Advertising the hydrants, I see in Copper, the local fire district, doesn't you allow, are the other district fire districts do?
That's correct. So we have an agreement with the different fire protection districts where they'll do what's called the squirt test or a bump test. They'll record the pressure. They'll clean if there's any bushes or shrubs around the hydrants. Yeah, and then we receive a report from them. And then if they have, you know, say there's, 400 hydrants in Ebbets Pass and there's 5 that are out of service, we'll receive that report and then we'll go ahead and issue work orders and go repair those or replace those hydrants that are out of service.
You get the flow?
So we can, however, it's always kind of an interesting consideration when you think about flow testing a fire hydrant, just because of the impact it has on the broader distribution system. So we could have a really long conversation about flow testing, but yes, we can. And oftentimes when we do that, Ralph, we do use a pitot gauge, and we can also, and then we can pull pressure off different hydrants and then kind of get an estimation of what the flow would be at those hydrants based on the pressure drop. Yep.
That policy of having the local fire agencies do the testing, is that a long-standing arrangement, or is it?
I believe it is longstanding. It was updated in 2021, I want to say.
Okay.
There was a price change in their work effort, per hydrant work effort, and there was also kind of a reinvigoration, if you will. A lot of the departments didn't have enough. Generally, they'll use like a newer staff member or less experienced staff member to do the work, kind of familiarizes them with the distribution system. And when we were reaching out to the fire departments about this work effort, some of them just simply didn't have the staff, and now they do. So it's kind of it's picked back up again. But it was my understanding that it had been around for many years.
Yeah, well, I'm familiar with it for a long
Yeah.
time in Rancho, but are we keeping up with the training of these departments? Because I know there is high turnover on those departments, and I just want to make sure that we're continuing our training effort with those departments.
Yes, we do. We have a really good relationship with the different fire protection districts, and we do periodically conduct training for them, for their less experienced staff, on how to operate our system. That's another great, continuing with the theme, that's another great insurance policy, that we don't end up with a lot of water main breaks. If you have a well-educated fire department, it helps reduce the amount of line breaks that you're going to have in the future.
You had a comment, Francisco?
Just a curiosity question, if you were to say, college professor and assess the status of the infrastructure on a scale of A, B, C, D, E, or F, how would you grade it?
Is a passing
A
grade
is absolutely, you can't find any better way to get it.
in terms of fire protection,
No, in terms
of just
infrastructure.
system condition? I would say we're at average to above average. Yeah,
B.
I would say B, C plus B, right around there.
I mean, I think that's gonna vary widely from one piece of infrastructure to the next.
Well,
It's hard to say system wide.
Well, I'm thinking about, water mains from my perspective, like speaking about fire hydrants and water mains, because one of the considerations I would say that you can rest assured about is the volume of water you have available for fire protection. I think that's one of the really positive things that CCWD can provide in terms of infrastructure when it comes to the system in the ground. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about just the whole shooting match? Well, we're in a significant, so we have, we've talked about it. We have 41 lift stations, right? 31 of which are around the lake. And most of those are vintage 1970s. Yeah, and yeah, we're pretty much there. Yeah, so when you look at the system overall, we're at a D. We're failing. Yeah.
That's my.
Gotcha.
Well, you
Yeah.
can't isolate that's one aspect of our infrastructure.
That's right.
You go through Rancho Calaveras, that was, the infrastructure there was constructed in the late 60s, early 70s. So distribution is completely different. You go
Yeah.
into Gold Creek where
That's right.
it's fairly modern,
I think like what Director Davidson is saying is accurate is there's going to be this, and Michael touched on it too. It's like a overall just kind of a shades of a lot of variability in terms of overall system condition. Now, when you look at system condition relative to negative impact for failure, some of those things are going to appear much more critical than others, and so that's going to kind of shade your consideration overall.
No, I don't.
In fact, Rancho is an A and Copper is an B minus, and all those things are considered. And then we understand why we're going to the B minus fix versus A index.
We do that.
Yeah.
Development of our capital improvement program.
Yeah.
It's not transparent.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, okay. Yeah, I understand what your request is, and I don't think it's a heavy lift for me to provide you an indication of what the challenges are, depending on the different disciplines within CCWD. I can pretty much readily show you that. From a non-ops report approach, just kind of, because, I think a lot of these images are trying to convey that, but I understand what your request is. Yeah.
Kelly recently told me that there's more than 350 miles of water distribution line within the CCWD system. How do you anticipate where your next break is going to be if you've got a line that goes from here to Bakersfield? So it's
Yeah, that's a really challenging aspect of the job.
But we do track that. We know where leaks reoccur. We track that.
Yeah, and we
have that.
discuss our top 10, we have top 10 worst, we have the most notorious lines. So we have this information that
And every year when we develop our CIP every year, we bring that information, based on, as Damon mentioned, it's both, how close are we to failure and what are the consequences of failure? And so there's different metrics, different ways that we evaluate those projects, and we go through that process as we update our CIP every year on a rolling basis. So
Yeah.
that will be coming before the engineering committee in the next few months. We usually try to get that done by March in the best case scenario, so that we've factored that into the next fiscal year's budget.
I just want to say something. I don't buy into the A, B, C, D, E, F grading of any of these facilities because, this is it's not just a mechanical aspect of our facility. There's also the operation and maintenance, that there are some things that we can do with staff that when we know we have, maybe a weak system, so it balances out. We do not have repeated failures at the
Right.
district. We do not. You know,
Yeah.
we have leaks, certainly in Rancho and other places, these older systems, but we do not have outages, failures. We don't have those. And sometimes a weak system can be managed better, and certainly we want to improve those systems, but I'm not going to go along with an A, B, C, D, E, F. It's going to be way too complex to go to every individual. There are parts of Rancho Calaveras that are 10, 15 years old.
Mhm.
You know, so we're gonna call that an A, but then the majority of the system out there is lower than that. I mean, somebody's gonna really have to get into explaining all the details that go into this grading system. What I saw here today, there's no definition of any of these outcomes, but there's a bunch of failing grades. I don't know what the definition, there's no description that go along with any of these, this
Oh,
model.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
bring
privy
that
to that
back.
document.
That's why
so-
we're.
We'll bring that back.
Yeah. Gotcha. I mean, and you know, all of these images highlight or follow on this conversation. This is a service line through rock, you know?
Losing this
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah,
That's what I'm.
gotcha. Yeah. And we've talked about this too, in terms of, you know, just basically taking an operations report over year and then slapping it down on the table and say, you know, I think we had 441 service lateral. Right, yeah. Yeah, so jumping back into this, I mean, you can see that we deal with all manner of challenges. This is a service line. We could not find this thing to save our lives. It water perking out the end of a cul-de-sac, and oh, lo and behold, the service line is bored through the rock in the hillside. So that's why we couldn't find the service line, because it was in the rock. So this is going to be one of those ones where you have to live to fight another day. You put the service line back through the rock, and then we talk with engineering about a way to reestablish a connection to this meter set.
Interesting.
Here's a 2-inch bluebell, the infamous bluebell again in Copper Cove on Burns Ferry, replacing, you know, this really thin, flat, fragile pipe of normally 2-inch in size, Dolores and copper. This is in Poker Flat. So we're back to this conversation of other utilities living next door to the water utility. So you see our employee there with his hands down in between electrical conduit, working on a water line, which always gives me the warm fuzzies when we think about insurance, right? I mean, and so here's a really, this is kind of the belle of the ball here. So, you know, we've had, and Jeff and I will talk to you about this here, I'm sure in the coming months, but we've had an inordinate amount of mixers and pump failures at pump stations and lift stations this year. This is a mixer, so you're not seeing the shaft with the mixer blade on it. You're seeing basically the motor and the cage. The image on the left, you can see the electrical power line is exposed and some of the wiring. So it was damaged while it lived. This thing lives in a wastewater lift station and churns all the thick, greasy mess, the stew, that's living in the lift station, and it collects these Swiffer shards and mop head shards on it, and it wears them like a dress. So you can see that image on the right, all of that garbage hanging off of the mixer cage is just kind of a reflection, you know, that our collections crew do difficult work safely, and they do a great job. So this is pulling that mixer, because that mixer is critical to ensuring the proper function of the lift station. If you can't mix all that debris up within the stew, you can't pump the stew. So it's critical to get these out and get them replaced, and they're not cheap. It's like a $30,000 mixer. Septic tank rehab is also a critical component of what the collections crew does. We have about 700 septic tanks. So cleaning them off and then ensuring that riser over the lid is watertight. So then when we hit the wet weather, we're not just getting it in, a ton of I&I, inflow and infiltration into the septic tank. And then also eliminating roots. We were talking earlier about roots around water systems. Roots around septic tanks and roots around the sewer system are just as nasty. So we're always in there, and you can thorough seal. We don't use thorough seal, but you can coat a septic tank. A lot of times we'll coat the outside of the tank to inhibit root intrusion. So that's a critical component. That's part of our sanitary sewer management plan or program. Not giving you too much access to the secret stash of files here at the district, but this is what ladder logic for SCADA looks like for a pump station. So this is kind of troubleshooting that our electricians do. You know, they get a pump that kicks on for a second, kicks off, and the operator can't understand why. The electricians can get into the brain of the operation, and for some reason, usually it's a lightning strike or some sort of electrical glitch in the PG&E provided power. The system will change. So you'll, instead of going from an on situation. So if the tank gets to X level, turn this pump on, and then when the tank gets to Y level, turn the pump off. Sometimes that can just change. And our electricians have the ability to get in there and understand why that happened and then correct it. So that's what the ladder logic looks like for that effort. This is, so you can ask an electrician to open up a laptop and do that from an office or a laboratory in a water treatment plant. And then when they're done with that, they can go climb B tank in the Jenny Lind system and replace transducers. And so kind of hard to see in the image on the left, but that is water. That's the open hatch on the roof of the tank with some transducers that are floating in the water. And then the image on the right is, either pulled the old ones or getting ready to drop the new ones in. And so kind of a standard job, but if you're afraid of heights, it can be tough. And our electricians are actually trained in climbing and fall protection. So they harness up and they wear gear.
Is that the tank that's up on the picture?
But even so, it can be a little,
No,
make your feet sweat a little bit.
that's the one question.
Flow meter calibrations, so then they can jump into testing and calibrating flow meters. So this is just a flow meter calibration of the signal. So what the signal is putting out, verified matching flow. So it's a 4 to 20 milliamp signal for control and flow of a flow meter. This is facilities maintenance. So we talked last month about the Huckleberry site cleanup. So that image on the left is a privacy screen on the fencing. Image on the right.
Why do we have that?
Just so folks won't see what's happening in the yard. It appears cleaner. So if we park that, or if we go put that mixer out there, somebody doesn't see it while they're driving by.
Dave? Are they done by that camp, boys camp, or whatever?
They're done by CAL FIRE Vallecito Camp. That is correct. So they'll go out and they'll put the piles out, and then we'll monitor those as they burn down. Yep. And they're out at La Cantena this week. And then our friend, the mixer motor again.
How often do you use them?
We try to use them as much as possible. So I would say this time of year, we're taking advantage of their skills weekly. It might be 2 days a week, but it's definitely weekly.
They have reduced those camps, though, haven't they?
They have. Yes, they have.
Do we have to pay for that?
It's $248 a day for 12 employees.
Well, guys, for how many hours?
The whole day.
8 hour days?
Yeah, you get them. Yep.
Wow, nice.
And they make quick work of stuff. They're fabulous.
Very good.
Because they want to get back from where they came from, right?
Yeah, right.
So-
I just have 3 quick questions for you, Damon.
Bertha,
Sorry, Director Underhill, unfortunately, you're an observer today, but we can address your questions offline. I'll follow up with you after the meeting.
I can't even ask a question, okay? All right,
how much did you say that mixer pump costs?
Close to 30 grand. Do you have like a friend that we might be able to hire, get us some neoprene suit, like 8-hour shift?
Well, in the previous pictures, it looks like that it's this big, but then there's another picture at the end where you've got a person's foot. I mean, the thing is this
Yeah.
big, so
It
all
can
motor.
churn if you consider like what we call a fatberg is like grease and fat, and it can get really thick. And so this thing can actually break all that stuff up.
So that's like a Tesla motor or something, so.
It's a really powerful high torque. Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
It's always very interesting stuff. Any other questions from the public?
And they can go through and make commitments up and meet the or do things.
Nice.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You can make it enough.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. I think the guys would too. Yeah, thank you.